Maria Torres had spent so many years running on empty that she no longer recognized the quiet ache settling behind her ribs, the ache that came from wanting something more than survival. The winter sun hadn't yet risen when she stepped out of Rosie's diner that morning, breath fogging in the sharp December air, her hands still trembling from the double shift she had worked the night before. At 32, she felt twice her age, sleep-deprived, heart-tired, worn down in ways that no one could see unless they knew where to look. The world had not been gentle with her since the day her son's father walked out, leaving behind a single note that said he couldn't do this anymore. Now, 3 years later, her life had become a rotating blur of grease-stained aprons, grocery store aisles, late-night bus rides, and the quiet, crushing guilt of never giving her boy the childhood he deserved. But on that dim morning, as she wiped down the counter for the third time, something in her spirit flickered, a fragile, unexplainable spark. Maybe it came from the way the snow dusted the windows, softening the edges of a world that had been so mercilessly sharp. Or maybe it came from Liam's small hand in hers that morning, warm and trusting, reminding her that she still had something worth fighting for. She didn't know it then, but a miracle was inching toward her, disguised as rusting steel and the unlikely price of $7. It happened on her 10-minute break, the small slice of time she usually spent scrolling through other people's lives. Families posing beside glowing trees, children wrapped in new coats, tables heavy with holiday meals she couldn't afford. She felt herself slipping into that familiar pit of comparison and quiet envy, the place where dreams went to die one compromise at a time. Out of habit more than hope, she opened the auction site she browsed whenever she needed a moment of escape. She scrolled past chipped dinnerware, outdated electronics, dusty boxes from old estate sales, objects whose stories were as tired as she felt. And then she saw it, abandoned cruise ship, starting bid, $7. At first she thought it was a joke, another bizarre listing buried for the amusement of late-night insomniacs. But when she clicked the photo, her breath caught. The ship was massive, towering like a forgotten giant against a gray industrial sky, its paint peeling, windows dark, rails eaten by time. To most people it would be an eyesore, a liability. But to Maria, it was something else entirely. She remembered the day she had taken Liam to the harbor just to watch ships slide across the horizon, remembered the wonder in his eyes as he asked what it must feel like to stand on something that carried you beyond the edges of your world. $7. It was absurd, irresponsible, ridiculous, and yet her thumb hovered. Before fear could stop her, she tapped bid, and everything in her life shifted silently like fate inhaling. The hours leading up to the auction's closing felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the wind would carry you or crush you. Maria checked her phone constantly during her shift at the grocery store, each glance a mixture of dread and disbelief. No new bids, no competition, just her name, current high bidder, $7, staring back as if mocking the bounds of logic. By the time she left early to attend Liam's Christmas concert, her chest felt tight enough to crack. But when her boy stepped onto that stage, face flushed, voice trembling with the first notes of his solo, the world around her softened. She saw in him the innocence she had tried so hard to protect, the little boy who still believed magic could find them even when life said otherwise. After the concert, they rode home on a bus rattling with weary passengers, Liam's voice bright as he recounted every small detail of the evening. Maria tried to keep pace with his joy, all while the minutes crept toward 8 o'clock. When the email finally arrived, "Congratulations, your bid has been accepted." Her legs nearly gave out. She didn't know whether to laugh or apologize to the universe for whatever chaos she had just invited into their lives. But something inside her whispered that this wasn't a mistake. It was a door, and for the first time in years, she felt the courage to step through it. Christmas Eve dawned with a gray sky and air sharp enough to bite, but Liam woke buzzing with the kind of excitement she had not seen in him since before life hardened around them. Bundled in coats too thin for the weather, they boarded a series of nearly empty buses heading toward the industrial outskirts of the city. As factories and shuttered warehouses blurred past the windows, Liam kept glancing at her, asking where they were going, what the surprise was. She only squeezed his hand and told him to trust her. When they finally walked through the rusted gate of Harbor Point Marina, the world felt eerily still, wind hissing through decaying masts, snow drifting across abandoned docks. And there, rising above the ruins like a sleeping colossus, was the ship. Even in its ruin, it held a kind of faded grandeur, the way an old cathedral holds the echo of centuries. Liam froze, awe widening his eyes. "Mom, is that a real cruise ship?" She nodded, breathless. "It's ours." For a moment, he simply stared at her as if she had handed him the moon. They climbed the creaking gangway together, stepping onto a deck coated with years of dust and neglect. Maria felt equal parts terror and wonder, terrified of what she had done, but awed by what she had dared to hope. And as they pushed open the first heavy door, darkness breathing out to meet them, she knew this day would mark them forever. Inside, the ship felt like a mausoleum of forgotten dreams. Grand staircases sagged beneath the weight of years. Velvet curtains hung in tatters, and once brilliant chandeliers clung to ceilings like ghosts of former luxury. Yet Liam moved through it with the enthusiasm of a child exploring a kingdom, long abandoned by its rulers. He darted from the empty pool to the broken theater seats to murals faded into haunting shades of blue. Maria followed close behind, her light sweeping over crumbling carpets, overturned furniture, and memories of passengers who once danced, laughed, and sailed under better skies. It wasn't until they reached the entertainment deck that her flashlight caught something unusual. A maintenance hatch, slightly ajar, hidden behind a fallen serving cart. It was unremarkable, the kind of detail most people would overlook. But Maria had lived too many years scavenging value from forgotten places not to notice it. When she pulled it open, the stale air that rushed out carried a strange stillness, as if time itself had been waiting behind that narrow doorway. Liam's eyes shone. "Can we go in?" Every instinct begged her to turn back to keep him safe. But something in that darkness seemed to call to her, softly, insistently. So she nodded, took his hand, and stepped into the narrow passageway. The metal walls closed around them, pipes dripping in steady intervals, echoing like a heartbeat. They were entering the ship's bones now, and its secrets. The passageway opened into a room that felt impossibly untouched, sealed off from the decay swallowing the rest of the ship. Shelves lined the walls, still stacked neatly with boxes labeled in fading ink. Navigation tools, emergency supplies, maintenance parts. But it was the heavy metal chest beneath a dusty tarp that stole Maria's breath. They pried it open with a crowbar Liam found nearby, and the lid groaned like something awakening from a long sleep. Inside were folders wrapped in plastic, documents marked with legal stamps and company seals. As Maria lifted page after page, her pulse stumbled. These were unclaimed assets, insurance settlements, escrowed payments, supplier refunds, money that had slipped through the cracks when the cruise line collapsed years earlier. Individually, the amounts were modest, but together they climbed into 6 figures. She read the totals twice, then a third time, unable to swallow the reality forming in her hands. Under maritime salvage law and the terms of the auction, anything left on board now legally belonged to the ship's owner. Belonged to her. Liam watched her with worry, confusion, and the first spark of hope. When she finally managed to speak, her voice shook with years of buried emotion. "Baby, we're going to be okay? Not someday, not maybe, not if God was merciful, now." The ship groaned around them as if exhaling, as if relieved its secret had finally been found. And on that cold Christmas Eve, deep in the belly of a forgotten vessel, a mother and her son held the miracle they never saw coming. What followed was a season of transformation, slow at first, then unfolding with the quiet confidence of spring after a brutal winter. The legal process took weeks, filled with appointments, signatures, verifications, and the disbelief of professionals who had never seen such a discovery emerge from a bankrupt relic. But in the end, the documents held, the accounts were confirmed, and Maria inherited enough to change the rhythm of their lives forever. She left her second job, then her first. They moved into a bright 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood where Liam finally had a room of his own, painted blue like the ocean he once dreamed of sailing across. Maria enrolled in community college to revive the nursing degree she had abandoned years ago, attending classes in the evenings while working part-time at a local library. Liam thrived, joining soccer, making new friends, laughing again with a freedom she had almost forgotten he possessed. They adopted a shelter dog he named Captain, a small tribute to the vessel that had saved them. Sometimes, late at night, Maria would stand on their balcony, listening to the hum of a peaceful street, thinking about how close they came to missing it all. One hesitation, one moment of fear, one decision to stay home instead of exploring that rusted maze, and none of this would exist. The ship might have rotted away entirely, its secrets sinking with it. But they had gone, they had dared, and life had opened. As months passed, Maria found herself thinking often of the woman she had been before that Christmas Eve, exhausted, stretched thin, surviving on hope so fragile it cracked under the slightest weight. Now, as she watched Liam race through the park with Captain chasing at his heels, she felt a quiet revelation settle in her bones. The ship hadn't saved them because it held money. It saved them because it reminded her of something she had forgotten: possibility. Life had hardened her to the point where she no longer expected anything good to arrive uninvited. She had learned to shrink her dreams to match her circumstances, to make herself small in a world that rarely made room for women.